In this clip, we're going to discuss how to do a batch recipe in Aspect Software. Creating a batch recipe allows you basically to create sub-recipes which can be used in other recipes, as well as allowing you to inventory items that you prep. Now, to get started, you need to have a place to put your batch recipes and organizing them in your recipe database. So to start, you want to go to Settings. You want to scroll down to Inventory Setup, and then go to Recipe Groups. We'll allow this report to load up. Now, what you're doing is you're looking for a place such as this, Batch. Don't worry about the fact that all of these say food. What you're simply looking to name a place to add your items. So to do that, you want to hit the green plus, and you can simply name your items. This one I'll just call Test Batch, for example. Simply hit OK, and now I'm done. You can just close out of this page. Now you're ready to start doing a batch recipe. To get started, you can go to Inventory, Edit Recipes, and this will allow you to load up your recipe database. Now, to get started with your batch recipes, as I said, you can see here there's already been a group called Batch which organizes these. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a batch recipe that will allow you to add a number of ingredients into one prepped product. For example, here you can see seafood chowder. This recipe is just a sample recipe, and all of these ingredients equals 128 fluid ounces, or essentially 1 gallon. You can see here that the price is about 8 cents a gallon, or 7.76 cents a gallon, or excuse me, an ounce, pardon me. So what this is saying is this recipe, all of these ingredients added together at these prices, comes out to about 8 cents an ounce. If you wanted to see what this price was per gallon, you could simply put in here, and I'll just have it match, 128 fluid ounces, and you can see that a gallon of this recipe equals $9.93. Put this back. So let's go ahead and get started and make a small batch recipe to show you as a sample. Your first step is to hit the green plus. This will open up the recipe template. And here we could do a recipe called coleslaw. Simply type in the name. The group, you'll want to define it to be the group where you want to put your recipes. For example, here's that test batch that I created a while back, or just in the previous sample. So we'll put it in there. Now, this is the only time that you use the gross yield and serving size, only when you're creating a batch recipe. So for example, my gross yield here is going to be 5 pounds. My serving size will be 1 ounce. Bear in mind, it's very important to keep ounces with pounds or weight, and if I was doing fluid ounces, if I said 1 gallon, I would use fluid ounces with volume. So let's start creating my recipe. First, I would go to Insert, and I'll put in my first item, which is coleslaw mix shredded. Here, I use 5 pounds of this item. And I simply hit OK. Now I need to put my dressing in. And here's the dressing I use. And I use 1 each for my batch recipe. And there I go. There is my coleslaw. So now I've completed a batch item, or a batch recipe. But I'm not quite finished yet. My next step is to right-click on the item I just created and scroll down to Recipe Options. Once I open the recipe options, I now have a couple choices to make. With your batch recipes, you're mostly concerned with checkboxes 1 and 3. The first one is primarily always going to be checked. This is going to allow the recipe to be used as a batch recipe, essentially saying, yes, I want to use coleslaw in other recipes. The third box says, you know what, I want to inventory this product too. If you decide to check the third box and you're going to inventory it, you need to decide first how you're going to inventory it, typically always changing the count size to 1 and then the volume you're going to count it in. Here I'm going to inventory my coleslaw by the 1 pound. You can also decide what group to put them in. Most people create a special item for all their prepped items. To do this, you would just create this in your inventory groups, which we discussed earlier in a previous clip. Once you've decided those factors, you're then ready to go into another recipe that may use coleslaw and add that item in. For example, possibly with grouper fingers here. To add the batch recipe, simply double-click on the item, and then here you would hit Insert as well. Now, as I scroll down, you will notice that when I get to coleslaw, notice there is a coleslaw batch. That batch with the parentheses means it's a batch recipe that's been created. This will allow you to not be confused with other items that you may purchase. This is my batch recipe. Here I might say, for example, that this is a 4-ounce side item that I'm serving with this item. So I add in 4 ounces, and I've now used batch. I've now used the batch recipe. So just to review, remember to add the word batch if you're just starting from scratch into your recipe groups by going to Settings, Inventory Setup, and Recipe Groups. Once you've added the word batch, you're then ready to start adding new recipes in, such as the coleslaw we just did.